Okay, so um, we have almost 30 people, 28 at the moment, and we are 2 minutes past the time, starting time. So I think it's a good time to start. Please feel free to enter the chat, say hello, let us know where you are attending the session from. It would be great to know. Here we are, I am in Toronto, Canada. For those who may be new to the group and to these sessions, I founded the group with Dick and Vivek in 2019. We completed a year in May, and initially we were doing presentation sessions once a month and in person. After the pandemics, when the pandemic started, we looked at ways to continue to bring content to people online. And what it did was that now we are able to bring in guests, presenters from any corner of the world, as long there's internet there. And also our members can be from anywhere in the world. As long as they are on a suitable time zone, or sometimes I know some of you make the effort of staying up late or waking up early to be with us, which is just amazing. I do appreciate that. But I also hope that you are really taking advantage of the content. I hope it is worth the effort for you. We do make our best to bring in good content related to Excel. Sometimes is Excel with other applications. Other times is we could say more old style Excel, but Excel has been growing so much the past few years that there's always and different content to show you. So just a quick introduction before I give you our guest. I'm a little bit lost here with my computer because I just have to get a new one. Anyways, I was hoping, let's see if my slide then passes. I have some instructions for those of you who might be new to Teams that we are using to give you to deliver the session. There's the microphone and the camera icon that you can see either at the bottom or at the top of your screen, depending on which version of Teams you are using. And it's good to keep the microphone off, turned off, and later even the video, although we do like to see your faces, but it also helps us maybe have a better internet connection during the session when the presentation is being done. And then at the end, please feel free to also turn on your video cameras again, because it's so nice to have a little chat at the end with you for those who have any comments or any questions. Okay. There's also an icon with a little hand that you can click, and when you have questions, we will know who's asking. But you can also use the speech balloon icon to type your comments on the chat area. So, okay, we have Abdun, Boom, Gaurav, Najina, Ken, Faraz, and Alex and Harry, so many people. Pramod, thank you so much for being with us. I can find my mouse. I don't know what happened. And let's see. Okay, next slide. Just to give you a heads up of what's going on, of what's going to happen in the next month, during the next month of September. We will have 3 sessions, maybe to compensate a little bit the August, where this is the only session that happened in this group. Learning statistics in Excel with George Mount on September the 3rd. Paula Guilfoyle will bring us tips for auditing Excel workbooks, and on the 16th, and Mark Proctor will bring mastering ranges, the building blocks. There's an S missing there of Excel. I took a peek at of the content that these guests are bringing, and you don't want to miss them. Everything is so interesting. So I do hope you can make it to join us. If not, you can, I will stop sharing now. I think I did. If you cannot join us, you can still register, and then you will be on our mailing list. And after the session, I send, maybe a couple of days after each session, I will send an email with the link for the video recording so that you can catch up if you couldn't attend, or you can watch again if there's something there that you really want to take a second look and practice. Okay, so without any more delays, let me bring you Danielle. Hi, Danielle. How are you?
Hello. So
Thank
lovely
you
to
for.
see you again on such an early morning.
Yeah, for Danielle is early morning.
No,
So it's 8 a.m. for Danielle, and for us here in Toronto, it's 6 p.m. And I'm guessing we have
perfect
people
timing.
attending from all around the clock.
Yeah.
Thank you, Danielle, for being with us at such early time. So Danielle, she is specialized in financial modeling, and she's been training. She has been delivering training before. She used to travel a lot, right, to deliver in person. Now, as everybody else, sorry?
Not anymore.
Not anymore, yeah. As everybody else now, we had to move to an online format. But she's doing very well, and she keeps delivering her content. And I can see the enthusiasm of people about this topic, because of course it's a very important and useful topic for every business. So Danielle has been delivering training. She's a speaker at events, and she also wrote 2 books. One of them is in the 3rd edition already, right?
That's right.
But Danielle will tell us about that. So I'm not going to take her any more time. And please, Danielle, just you can share your screen, take the mic, and let us know what you have for us today. And of course, people feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we will monitor that. And at any point in time during the presentation or at the end, we will be asking those questions to Danielle. Okay? Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Great. Thank you, Celia. Can you see my screen? You can see my
Yes. Yes.
And from time to time, I'm going to show you Excel. So can you see my Excel now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to move that aside, just making sure. This is actually my first time presenting on Teams. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, just trying to get everything working.
Yeah, and now I just realized that
meetups as well. But
yeah, and some people, just letting you know, the Teams team is constantly making changes and improvements. And one of the things that happened recently is that they moved the icons that we used to have at the bottom, where we could find video, microphone, chat, all that used to be at the bottom, but it was kind of annoying because sometimes it would go on top of the content. So now they moved that to the top right. So if you are a bit confused with where the icons might be, if you are in the desktop version of the application, you might be able to find, depending on if you turned on that setting or not. Okay. Okay, Danielle, sorry about that. I won't interrupt you anymore.
That's okay. Feel free to jump in. I cannot see the chat at the moment, but that's okay. So feel free to just jump in with any questions or comments. Yeah, I'll sort of be jumping between a bit of financial modelling theory and then some practical stuff in Excel. Before anybody asks, yes, I can share. I'll send a copy to Celia of the presentation and also of any Excel files that I use. I've got a bit of stuff prepared for you, but depending on the questions and the direction that we take, I may change it somewhat. So feel free to jump in with what you're interested in. But as Celia said, this is me. So I'm a financial modelling specialist. Financial modelling is my world. It's what I live and breathe. It's pretty much all I've ever done is using Excel for the purpose of building financial. I've actually written a couple of books about it. So these ones, so as Celia mentioned, that one is actually the third edition, and Financial Modelling in Excel for Dummies. I'm going to refer to some of those throughout my presentation today. So I sort of, anything to do with financial modelling, I'm really, really into and really interested in. So first of all, I'd like to get an idea from you what you think financial modelling is, because I know I've attended this group several times. The timing actually works quite well between Sydney and Toronto, so I've managed to make it to low idea of the background of people. By the way, Celia was my guest speaker a couple of months ago for my virtual meetups here in Sydney, and this is just payback. Is that right? But I'd like to get an idea. So I know you guys are all sort of Excel enthusiasts, so you're certainly interested in Excel and you're using Excel a lot. But I'd like to get an idea from you about what you think financial modelling is, you know, whether it's got anything to do with fashion or catwalks or anything like that. Maybe you could just pop it in the chat and tell me what your definition of financial modelling is. You know, what do you think, you know, when you hear the word financial modelling, what do you think of? So just pop that in the chat and I'll get Celia to tell me financial modelling is. You know, is it just Excel? Is it more than Excel? Is it something really complicated and confusing? Anybody got any?
So we have Gaurav saying financial modeling is a process of creating a scenario analysis with various variables, which are easy to update with a change in strategic planning.
Okay,
and
great.
We have Faraz saying it's numbers dancing up and down.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, convert data into insights, any sort of model that helps run scenarios, forecasting, planning, cost benefit in various scenarios. That's hopefully
Scenarios gets mentioned, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We have Pat using Excel to provide useful information from data from various sources to enable timely decisions based on real-time data.
That's a good one, yes.
Yeah, and finally, financial. Go ahead.
You guys definitely know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Creating formulas to analyze quantifiable data. And I know I missed one here at the top. I hope that financial modeling is broader than just the three main financial statements.
Yeah.
Income statement, balance sheet, and what's the CF? I don't know. IS, BS, and CF. Cash flow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Income statement, cash flow, balance sheet. I mean, the traditional definition of financial modelling is income statement, or here in Australia or in England we call it the P&L, or the profit and loss statement, the P&L, cash flow, balance sheet, those three financial statements and how they all hang together. That's the kind of traditional structure of a financial model. But to me, a financial model is a heck of a lot more than that. I mean, my definition of a financial model is that it's a tool which is typically built in Excel that displays real world solutions to problems, or possible solutions to real world financial problems. So it needs to be a financial problem, kind of question that needs to be you know, something like, you know, how much profit are we going to make next month, or should we go ahead with this project. There's usually some kind of a financial question. Often it's a structure like you see on the screen. It's something that's been built, usually in Excel. It's often it can often be like a set of roads like this. It can be something that's been built. It can often be sort of built over time, and perhaps if it isn't planned properly, it can be very confusing and very difficult to navigate.
Okay, Danielle?
Yes.
Can I just interrupt you? So I was asking because sometimes you cut a little bit. I was just asking our attendees if that was also happening for them, in case it wasn't just me. But yeah, so just to let you know, it seems that Danielle may have a little bit of issues with the Wi-Fi this morning, but so we can just be patient. Don't if it stops for a little bit, it should come back. If any one of us, either Danielle or myself or any of you has problems with the internet connection, we can sorry, I need to mute someone here. Okay. Danielle, you can unmute yourself because I mute everyone to block that noise. If anyone has problems with internet, we can get out of the meeting and then join the meeting again. Okay, as long as someone stays on the meeting should continue. And by the way, I forgot to mention that the meeting is being recorded, just to let you know. Yeah, so okay, everything is good. Even if it stops a little bit, it usually we can hear everything that Danielle says because it resumes from where we lost her. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you,
it
Danielle.
tends to catch up. I have found it. It does happen from time to time. I don't know. I've tried all sorts of different things. I think it's my Wi-Fi, but it just will stop for a couple of seconds, and then so just be patient. I talk fairly slowly. I won't rush, and yeah, it'll just be patient, and it will catch up. So
yes.
I'll stop every now and then and see if anybody's got any questions, and feel free to jump in and interrupt me, Celia. So what I'd like to really focus on for you today is, the idea of financial modelling best practice, and I'll certainly refer to the two books that I've written. There's a section in the Dummies book all about financial modelling by the rule book, and then the other book has a section on principles of best practice. So I'd like to sort of go through with you some of the best practice in financial modelling when you're using Excel, because as Excel users, I think you guys, even though you might say, I've got no idea what financial modelling is, I don't do financial modelling at all, a lot of the things that I'll talk about are really just common sense, and you might find that you're probably doing a heck of a lot more modelling than you realise. A lot of the things that are best practice in financial modelling are about Excel and reducing the possibility for errors and that risk of having an error. I'm sure that you guys have all heard some Excel horror stories. Heard of those horror stories of that horrible, that terrifying moment when you think that possibly something has gone wrong in your Excel spreadsheet or in your financial model. There's nothing more absolutely terrifying than the possibility that something has gone wrong. And if you Google Excel horror stories, I'm sure you'll find lots and lots of stories or situations where something has gone awfully wrong. We always say the only thing that's worse than finding an error in your model is not finding an error in your model. And I'm sure that you have lots and lots of stories of where, somebody failed to pick up a cell and you ended a hole in your budget or something like that, and you don't want that to happen to you. So a lot of the things that I'd like to cover with you are some ways of reducing the possibility for errors. And to me, I think there's probably 3 different types of errors in financial models. I think that number 1, formula errors is probably the most embarrassing. It's quite a career damaging thing to have happen to you. If you make a mistake, if you're presenting you're presenting, you know, the output of your model or your analysis that you've done in Excel, and somebody goes, oh, hang on, those numbers don't look right. They don't add up properly. It's probably the most embarrassing thing that can happen, and you really lose credibility. Nobody will pay any attention to anything that you say after that. So firstly, formula errors, that's probably the easiest to fix and to make sure. We'll have a look at some ways to stop that from happening. Number 2 is incorrect assumptions or inputs. Now that's harder to fix, but really, you know, that sort of idea of making sure that the assumptions that go into your calculations are really clear, that you can very clearly see what those assumptions. Logic error, logic error is probably the most difficult to identify. So, you know, this gives you this, and then this gives you this, and then this gives you this, and then there's some kind of timing error or something like that. That can be really embarrassing and very difficult to find, and can be quite bad to find in a model. So the 4 things that I'd like to cover with you today is assumptions documentation, some strategies to reduce errors. We'll have a look at adding some error checks, you know, just some little calculations that can check errors. And then lastly, we'll go into some tips, tricks, do's and don'ts for best practice. So before we jump into assumptions documentation, I'll just stop for a sec. Celia, are there any questions or comments from anybody before I keep going?
Everything is good. Just people agreeing. Just people agreeing on the embarrassment it can be when there's errors. Yeah.
Everybody always has a story about an error that somebody else made. Yeah. It's always like someone else made that error, or, you know, they heard about it from someone else. It was never them that made the error. But yeah, there's lots and lots of stories like that. So let's jump into assumptions documentation. So it's really important to document your assumptions in a model. Average out. So having some kind of documentation will help you to validate the model. So there's nothing worse than trying to validate somebody else's calculations, and you trace it back and you trace it back and you trace it back, and it's a hard number, or it's worse than that, it's actually been typed into the formula, and there's no documentation. Where did it come from? You know, where did you get the number from? How did you calculate it? So it's a good idea to list your assumptions on a separate page. So have like an assumptions tab and have all of your assumptions listed out. And the more detail, the better. Don't leave at the end when you're almost at the end, and we'll leave documentation to the end. Don't leave it to the end. Put the detail in as you go, all that kind of nitty-gritty detail about what you did and why you did it and all of that sort of stuff. You won't remember all of that stuff later, so make sure that you do it as you go. When you actually go to document those assumptions, let's have a look at how we actually do that. So there's a couple of different practical techniques. Now, none of this is rocket science. I'm sure you guys know how to do a lot of this. So I'm just going to jump over into my Excel. If I move my Excel over, and I'd like to have a look at the different methods of in Excel. So should be able to see now. So firstly, you could do a note. You know, I'm not a huge fan of those notes. So when you click, let me just make that a little bit bigger. So when you hover over it, you see the comment. You can do a, sort of documentation in there. I don't really like it because it doesn't print very well. You don't see it, and that kind of red flag looks a bit messy. There's this new type of comment threads, which is quite nice. So you can actually create threads it's new to 365, I think. So that's another way of doing documentation. Personally, I actually prefer, I'm going to jump over the page, I actually prefer doing comments like this. So, you don't see any documentation. So here we've got a forecast here. We say, here's my growth, and I click on the growth, and up pops a little comment or a documentation or something that, you know, like the modeler is saying, you know, don't forget, don't forget that this is, you know, something that you need to remember. So I've done that. So that's just done using your data validation, and we just do that under the input message. So we just type in a little comment, and then that just pops up there. That's not the other one. The next one is just a bit of footnoting. You know, you can, I don't know if you ever do this, Celia, but you know when you go into the footnote on the setups and you can do the header and footer in there? I never use that. I find it, do you ever use that, Celia?
I use it when it's for when I need to print, when I know that I'm going to print or the user is going to print the page. I use that and to create information there about whatever is necessary about the document, but not for notes.
Yeah, not for notes. Yeah, so when you want to show the file path or the page number or something like that, and you know that it needs to be, but you can't actually link to the header and the footer. You can't see it. Modeling is very much a soft, you know, it's not, we don't do it, we generally don't print until the very end, or if at all. So generally we're not really looking at it in a hard copy, we're looking at it on the screen. So if you're going to do footnoting, I would prefer to do it just like this, where you say, you know, you could just change the font of the footnote and make that a just a superscript or something like that, and then you just do it like that. You can also use hyperlinks. So you know, you could just do like a you know, just type in the link or something like that, or you could do like a table of contents. You go insert link, and then you go, you know, place in the document. You can jump around within the file. That's another way of doing it. My preferred method, though, for documentation of assumptions is just to use hard-coded. Like, it's nothing technically difficult at all. Just note, growth rate does not change over time. That's it. You're not going to miss it. It's right there in front of you. Whether you know, just put it underneath the assumptions and show like any kind of note or comments or where it came from right there, straight in front of you. The other thing I quite like doing is using some dynamic text. So like this, so using the ampersand. So that way, if you've got any, probably more when you're doing a report or showing the output of your model, is having some kind of numbers and text and words actually linked in together. So that way, and I've used a text function just to format what the numbers look like. Perhaps the most technically difficult, but if I were to change that to something else, you can see there that everything changes and my commentary automatically changes as well. And that way, because particularly when you're doing reports and things that you're having to update monthly or something that you're often updating, if you type what the numbers were, what the assumptions were, the chances are you're probably going to forget to update it, and then you'll have one of those embarrassing errors and then nobody will believe your numbers afterwards. So I do recommend doing it like that. So I'm going to jump back into my...
Danielle?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. Would you like to try turn off your camera? Maybe it will help a little bit, because every now and then you freeze. So maybe that will help a little bit.
Yeah, we can give that a go.
Thank you.
Has that gone off now? Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you well, and maybe it will help with the speed. Thank you.
Let's give that a go. Sorry, I know it can be a little bit annoying. Okay, so firstly, so that was assumptions documentation. What I'd like to talk about now are some strategies for reducing error. So we talked about that horror of having an error in your model. So, you know, we'll let's talk about a couple of ways that we can reduce the possibility for error in your model. Don't want to have mistakes. So in the dummies book that I wrote in 2017, there are 10 strategies for reducing error, and I'd like to go through each of these. So there's just a couple of techniques that you can use to reduce the error in your model. So number one is using the enter key. So getting into the habit of using the enter key rather than clicking somewhere else. So I'm going to just show. You should be able to see my Excel, and I'm just going to show you, like, let's say here, for example, if you just did a very simple calculation like that, and when you finish doing the calculation, you hit the enter key, yeah? You don't just click somewhere else, because what I see a lot of people do is they go like that. They click somewhere else, and sometimes everything all right? I can hear somebody on the line.
Yeah, I'm going to mute. You can continue, Danielle.
So yeah, okay, great. So that's number one, is just using the enter key. So always, you know, look at the numbers. Does it look right? Does it look what you intended it to be, rather than just clicking somewhere else? Number two, check your work. So after you hit the enter key, look at the formula. Does the value look correct? So, you know, look at the number. Is that the number? You know, get out an offline calculator and make sure that it's working properly. And after you've checked it, check it again. So you copy, generally we say, you know, do the calculation, check it, copy it across and down, and then check it and check it again. Not a bad strategy is just using the F2 key. So if you, once you've copied it across, and then you just hit F2 and, oops, F2, and then you can kind of see what the where the numbers are coming from, and that will help you. And once you've checked it 3 times, get someone else to check your work. So I used to have a bit of a deal going with one of my colleagues. I'd say, look, you check my models and I'll check your models. And that way, you know, you have somebody else looking at the calculations before it gets published is not a bad idea. Next is documentation and validation of assumptions. So we've talked about that. So just making sure that the assumptions are really clearly laid out, so that any decision clearly see what the assumptions, documentations, the assumptions that go into them. If something is a little bit complicated, you know, as often calculations in financial models are, we sometimes do a flow chart like this. So we say, like, this is an example from the business case that I do in one of my training courses. So we have the total population, we narrow it down by the pet owners, because we're calculating the number of customers with pets. So we say total population times pet ownership equals pet, gives you the number of customers required, and that can kind of flush out any logic errors. Number 7 is stress testing. So stress testing would be something like this, where you put a 0 perhaps for price, and the revenue would be 0 as well. So that kind of thing can, you know, put your model under stress and make sure that the calculations are working.
That's a good one.
So if you were to double the, yeah, would the staff costs double? Was there some comments there, Celia, from?
No. We can continue. Thank you.
Yeah, so you could do something like changing the growth rate to 0. So in that example that I showed you earlier, In fact, let me just drag it over. So like, for example, if we were to say with this one, if I were to say that was expect everything to remain flat, and if it didn't, you'd know that there was a problem with your model. Sometimes charting can help you to sort of see something visually. F11 is one of my favorite shortcuts. You just highlight the data and then hit F11 and it's going to create an instant chart. So that can kind of help you to flush out any anomalies in your calculations. One of my favorite things to do is to run some scenarios. If people are interested and if we have time at the end, I can spend a little more running some scenarios, sensitivity analysis, because as you guys correctly mentioned at the beginning of the session, scenarios and sensitivities is a really important part of financial modelling. So if I might just show you a quick example. If I drag my Excel over again, let's say here, so you've got a base case. Under the base case, we're going to make $15 million. And if I were to trading is going to change and we'll make 16.5 million. So just a really simple example of how we can toggle between best case, base case, worst case using a drop-down box. So you can either use a data validation drop-down box, or you can use one of these little form control in-cell drop-down boxes to drive calculations in your model. So number 9 is take note of Excel errors. I quite like seeing Excel errors. I know these are horrible sometimes. You think, oh no, what have I done? My calculations, I've done something wrong. I would much rather see an error than seeing a number that I think is right when in fact it's completely wrong. So do take note of Excel errors. I don't recommend, I know that you can suppress errors, so you can use an if error around it, and that will suppress any errors from showing. I try not to do that just because sometimes an error is telling you something that you need to know. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the new type of error, which is error. So if I should give you an example here, so if you're using if you're using 365 and you wanted to do a dynamic array, one of my favorites is if you have a list like this and you want to create a unique list. If I were to just go in and create a unique list like that, it wouldn't be able to do it because I've got something in the way. So anything that's in the way is going to cause a spill, and if I get rid of it, then that gives me my unique list. So if you ever see a spill error, that's a new type of error. That's the reason for that. And lastly is circular references. I'm sure if you've been using Excel for any period of time, you'll probably have seen some circular references. Do not ignore a circular reference. Circular reference should not be ignored. If you get a circular, whatever you're doing, just undo, close without saving. You really can't or you shouldn't have a circular reference in a financial model, because here's an example of a circular reference. Is an orange called orange because they're orange, or because oranges are orange? So that's the kind of logic that we're dealing with with circular references, and we really can't have that sort of calculation in Excel. Excel just doesn't handle something. So it's quite a common thing in financial modelling is to have, particularly when we're doing the income statement, the cash flow and the balance sheet. So when you've got your interest is an input to your income statement drives the cash drives the debt drives the interest the interest drives the income statement drives the cash. So you end up with a circular reference in interest calculations. That's not really what you want. Breaking that loop, ideally, you'll get around it mathematically. So you'll stop that from happening. So you'll calculate the interest first, and then you link that, or you base it on the previous month, or something like that. Or you might need to, as a last resort, you might want to do a macro if necessary. So yeah. So lastly, is in my strategies for reducing error is some error checks. So error checks are basically where you are looking, okay, well, if this cell should be equal to this cell, and if it's not, I'd like to know about it. So a good financial modeler will always be looking for opportunities to include error checks in their models. It will usually help the user of the model, not necessarily the builder, and it certainly should not replace good modelling practice. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of error checks, and I'll go into error checks a little bit further. So so let's say here where you've got different makes for transmission, and I've just used a really simple sum if formula. But if somebody were to, the old space, if somebody puts a space at the end of it, that's going to cause a problem. And we don't want, that should not say, okay, that should, so that, so we are allowing it. So, I mean, if you were to do equals like that, that will, you could say, if this cell does that cell, give me error, otherwise give me a 0. That will give you the error. The way that I had it here, I used a tolerance for error. So it actually allows it to be $1 out, or 1 unit out, and that actually allows the error to be okay. So in this case, probably not such a great idea. I'd say maybe it should be 0.1, and that will flag my error that way. So these are the 10 strategies for reducing error that I've gone through. And I'll just stop and see if there's any questions, because the last thing I'd like to do is to go into a little bit more detail about error checks. So how's everybody doing?
Everything is okay. Someone was mentioning pivot tables, Anthony. I'm not sure in which part of in which rule he was referring to the pivot table, but that could also be, depending on the data, one good strategy to find anomalies.
Yes, it could be in that example that I showed. Yes, you could use pivot tables to try to find.
He's saying circular references.
Oh. Yeah, it's still going to be a circular reference with a pivot table. Yeah, maybe you could explain a bit more what you mean by that. Might be some other method. Generally, I mean, pivot tables are fantastic, certainly for reporting and for dashboards, for analysis. But for modeling, I mean, modeling is more about inputs and outputs, and you have that kind of dynamic of, you change the assumptions and then the calculations automatically change with the tables. So we generally don't use pivot tables in financial modeling, although they are useful in certain instances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they need to be refreshed, right? So you don't have an immediate outcome when you make a change if you don't refresh the pivot tables.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, usually with a model, you kind of expect to the drop down, and you'd expect everything to automatically change, and if it doesn't, you need to refresh the pivot table each time, or perhaps even sometimes I just do a little macro or something that's going to automatically refresh it. I find the dynamic arrays are kind of similar in a way. One of the other reasons I often don't use pivot tables is just because of you can't control the size of the pivot table. It doesn't, you don't control how big it is, and the same goes with dynamic arrays, because it will just automatically spill down and across. So similarly with dynamic arrays and with pivot tables, you need to give it a lot of space. So you need to say, give it space to the right or space below it as well.
Yeah.
This is Dick Moffat. Here. Have you ever used data validation? For example, in your model, you have that second column where you have what is it, manual, automatic, or something? What are the choices that they should be driven?
Automatic calculation?
Yeah, use data validation. Sorry, where you have it.
Yes.
And that prevents garbage in, garbage out, like you said, right?
Yes.
So that you won't get people with a space at the end and things like that. Unless, of course, you're importing from the data from somewhere else, and that's a whole other story. But if they're typing it into your model, data validation is one of my best friends.
Yeah, like you say, yes, love data validation. That would, when you set up the model and you want people to use it, then yes, definitely I would use data validation to stop that from happening. It doesn't stop people from pasting over the cell, unfortunately, but it certainly can reduce that possibility.
Well, if you turn on protection, it should have some kind of advantage. But you're right, that can be a problem.
Yeah, but I find if you.
I just tell people, if you copy and paste, I'll cut your hands off. That's all.
Yeah. Well, there's that. Great strategy.
I have a warm and fuzzy approach, right?
Sounds good, Dick. Okay. So, any other questions before we move on?
We have a comment from Oakley saying that he also likes to use transpose together with the dynamic arrays, so that the spill goes horizontally instead of down.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. I love. I used to use transpose a lot in the old version of Control-Shift-N. It's really, really useful. But yeah, even easier now with the dynamic arrays. And yeah, that's a good point. Just moving something around is really easy. I do find I do hold off a little bit on using dynamic arrays still, because not all of my clients are using 365, so we do just need to be a little bit careful with that. But yeah, definitely, certainly an improvement in some ways, not always. Okay, so I bit more detail about building error checks into your model. So as I demonstrated, the options for building error checks could either be, one cell. I mean, the first one that's probably my favorite. It's just one cell minus the other, because it gives you the size of the error, and yeah, it just kind of shows you. And it's really quick and easy to do, because I'm often doing, lots and lots of error checks. The equals, like I showed you, that will give you either a true or a false. Now, I don't recommend doing the does not equals be, because because it actually truncates at 14 decimal places. So certain checks don't always work. So it could be 0.000 something out. And so that's why I don't recommend doing that third one. If you do want to show the word error, I do recommend using the absolute value ABS, like I showed you, although perhaps one may be a little bit too high. So you're saying you're allowing a tolerance for error. So you're saying you're allowing it to be one out, otherwise there's an error. I do usually do a summary, because that way you can sort of see at a glance. So sometimes I have clients that come back to me years even afterwards and say, the models are working, and I'll be able to just see one single cell and be able to trace back much more easily where the error is. I might show an example of that a little later on. So just lastly, just a couple of tips and tricks and do's and don'ts for best practice in financial modelling. So firstly, consistency of formulas. So like that example I showed you, having one all the way across and all the way down. Now, I know this is Excel 101, but it's amazing how many quite advanced modelers don't always do this. So using the dollar signs in a really clever way. So I'm just going to jump over into Excel now. You should be able to see my Excel. And so, for example, with this one, you know, you wouldn't go like this. You wouldn't say 250 times that, and then, you know, because that would take forever. What you would do is use your dollar sign. So you put the dollar sign in front of the A and the 2. So you'd use your F4 shortcut to toggle through and to get dollar signs working. One of the other things we often, now with dynamic arrays, you could go like that and say that multiplied by that. Would anyone think to do that? Now it's giving me a skill error because I've got data in the way, but otherwise it could do it like that. What do you guys think? Do you think that's a better way of doing it, or that I did? It is using dynamic arrays, and it is giving us consistency of formulas. So what do you guys think? Would you prefer to do it like this, or would you prefer to do it like that? Two sort of alternate ways of doing it. What do you think, Celia? Which method would you?
Well, I never used the dynamic arrays method, but there's I can see one advantage is if you need to fix or to check a formula, you just need to do it in one cell, right? So you don't have to be checking all the other ones and see if everything is correct. So that's an interesting one.
Yeah. Yeah, but one of the important things is really just to make sure that you have consistency of formulas, because you know, there's only 9 cells there, but often we end up with, you know, thousands and thousands of rows all the way down, and if you make a change, you want it to just automatically flow through. The next point is not hard coding. So always linking, you know, particularly with assumptions documentation like we talked about, you know, tracing back, being able to trace the source data with the links. The only hard coding should be input variables. And there's usually a kind of standard. So we show, you know, where something is hard coded and something is a formula. You should have it in a different font or a different sort of color code. You can use that file that Microsoft has very kindly set up for us, or blue font. One of the methods of this is using a corkscrew cash flow. So, you know, with a opening and closing cash flow forecast. So you have your opening cash and then whatever happened in the month, and then you have your closing cash. And so that closing cash needs to link up to the next one, and then that's going to flow throughout. And if you don't link, that won't work properly. And so linking is a really important point in financial modelling. And having said that, only enter it once, so you never enter the same value twice. Always reference that one cell. Never hard code values within formulas. You know, something like that, you would always, that 136,800 should be a separate cell, and you should link to that. And lastly is daisy chaining or spaghetti links, and that's when you link to a link that links to a link right throughout the model. So how are we going for time?
Well, we are
Celia.
almost, yeah. Can you hear me? You can still have maybe 10-15 minutes. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Okay, I've just got a couple more points to make, and then I'll wrap it up then and see
no problem.
what sort of questions and comments people have got. So formatting and labeling is important. So having using symbols for your formatting, or labeling that really clearly. mixing up modeling is mixing up units. So, you know, mixing up kilometers versus, you know, meters, or, you know, that sort of thing, and labeling can try to reduce that. Having column and row headings where you have only one unit or currency in that row or unit heading. So if I were to present something like this, what would you guys say if this was an output of a report or a model? What would you guys think of that? And Celia can tell me what you think. What is wrong with my table that I've built here?
Let's see if there are any contributions here on the chat. Let's wait a little bit. Start looking for a new target repeated.
Yeah, the target is
the formatting. The formatting of text on variance target. Yeah.
So the variance to target is showing it as a negative, but read. So we always, to make it really, really clear that something is a negative, you should put the brackets around it. And I know this is something that seems really minor, but particularly in a model where it's very important. And one of the most common errors in a model is getting your signs around the wrong way, you know, taking something away and rather than adding it up. It's very, very, particularly when you're trying to balance a balance sheet, for example, it's very, very common problem. So we do recommend that you use the brackets rather than the dash.
This is Dick. All numeric values must be right justified. Yeah. Sorry.
The
stickler.
Yes.
Did
absolutely.
You hear me?
Yes. Yeah. So having the numbers that are left aligned rather than right aligned. Is that what you meant?
They have to be right aligned. Yes. They have to have a because the decimal place in a given column has to line up. Otherwise.
Exactly.
Otherwise, so for example, that last column is even bad because you have that 30 in there that is not formatted right. You notice how it's moved over? It's tight against the right because it's not formatted, right?
So the formatting is different, yeah.
And same thing with the second from the bottom. I don't know what you got 2 spaces in there. So yeah, so you got to make sure your decimal places and your commas line up. Yes,
absolutely. Sorry. And similarly with the percentage, it's all the percentage column is higgledy-piggledy. It's just difficult to read, and yeah, I mean, just from an even accounting perspective, you know, numbers really need to be right aligned. Text generally we say left aligned, but you know, if the column's really wide, sometimes it's okay to center it. Yeah. Also, any other comments there, Celia?
Thousand separator. Right.
Comments.
It's similar to what Dick mentioned. Thousand separator. It's the comma in your case. Should be aligned.
It's not a consistent format in the whole column.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So having the comma separator makes it so much easier to read the number. Yeah, and some kind of an order. Or what about the title, the labels I've got there, or percentage? That's not very helpful, is it? I can see it's a percentage. Percentage of what?
Exactly.
Yeah. So just take care. It should be a communication tool. So you should make it really clear what your numbers are saying, so that other people can interpret. Your model needs to speak for you after you're not around. So having good documentation, having good assumptions, making it really clear and easy for other people to understand is going to make your model so much easier to read. So just to finish off, those were the 4 points that we covered: the why and how of assumptions documentation. We looked at we went into some error checks, and lastly, a couple of do's and don'ts for best practice modelling. So that's pretty much what I have for you. If you are interested in learning more about financial modelling, I have several online courses that are available. One of the things that you might consider is becoming a certified financial modeler. It's a relatively new certification, and the next exam is coming up on the 24th of October. So that's something that you might think about, is becoming a certified financial modeler. So yes.
Is this from Model Off?
No, the guys who started Model Off were actually founded this as well.
That's what I thought.
But but the ownership is different now.
Changed,
so, yeah. These guys are based in Toronto.
Oh, nice.
Actually, yep.
So we got to find them and beat them up.
Yeah.
What are the requirements, Danielle, to be able to do this kind of exam? What kind of preparation? What kind of
basically you have to build. For level 1, you need to build a financial model in 4 hours. So you are given. Do you want me to show you? I don't know if people are interested. I can show you what the model looks like. So
please.
I think so. Yeah, that would be nice. And would someone taking this exam need to be an accountant or have a heavy knowledge in accounting?
There is no requirement except that you can build a financial model in 4 hours. So what you are given at the beginning is basically these 3 columns. So can you see my Excel now? So you are given basically 3 years of history. You're given an income statement, a cash flow, and a balance sheet. And you then need to create 5 years of projections. And so you need to, yeah, that's it. I know it's a piece of cake, yeah. So you need to build the revenue schedule. So you're given, so we need to build, you need to build that. Cost of sales, you need to build a depreciation schedule. The working capital, you need to calculate the debt. And in this case, I've run a macro to stop that circular reference from happening that we talked about. There's usually some kind of curly deferred tax thing that you need to calculate. And then there's also an equity schedule. So you then need to link that all back to your financial statements. And then with a bit of luck, your balance sheet will balance. And of course, we do a little error check at the bottom here. Oops. There's an error check in there to make sure.
Yeah, so you either have to be an accountant or you have to have done this before for a client. Like I've done it multiple times, but I'm not an accountant, but I understand what's going on here.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a long time to learn how to build with it. But when you register for the exam, they give you completed versions. So you basically so you just practice and practice and practice until you can build it.
That's where copy and paste comes in.
No, it needs to be linked.
Does it use links?
So of course the assumptions documentation. Absolutely, yes, of course. So
between worksheet links, between worksheets.
Yeah. Not external links. And then we do a summary. You can do a ratio analysis, and then a cover page. That's it. Yeah. So that's so if people are interested in becoming a certified financial model, that's what's involved. That's coming up in 20 October. And this is that I've got coming up. If people, we've got one next week, which is a debate. So we get people to vote. And we've got the financial modelling podcast. We are going to be running it live. So we've got quite a few different topics coming up, and anything to do with the wonderful world of financial modelling. It is an amazing, world of so many resources nowadays that you can go to and improve your financial modelling skills. And having really good Excel skills, I think, is a really great way of starting out as a financial modeler. Absolutely. So I'm going to stop sharing. That's pretty much what I have for you today, and I'll turn my camera back on. Here we all are.
Okay, I'll do the same. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Somebody, Ian Schnur wants to ask a question, Celia.
Oh yeah, Ian. Yeah, Ian is Ian here? He's the
Sounds like he
heads up.
He wants to ask a question. Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, he heads up FMI, the exam that we just talked about. Okay, so we'll just see.
So Archie is saying he has a question. Would you like to turn on your mic?
I meant
yes.
Archie. Sorry, I meant Archie.
Thank you, Celia, and
thank you.
Thanks to the great guest, Danielle, for the great presentation. Well, I'd like to ask Danielle if there is a course or a book that teaches the well, I'm sure there is no one answer to this question, but at least a common or a usual way of seeing or building a problem solving towards Excel situations. Like, because I've had this experience that when we sit in the meetings or like in the team meetings trying to solve something, different people approach it from different angles, which is sometimes very good, but most of the times it takes a long time to come to be in the same page at first.
You mean from an Excel perspective?
Exactly, yes. Like, we want to solve this problem, so this is how we approach it, this is how we solve it, then we build our formula, then we test our formula, like that.
I can't think of a resource specifically about that, although I must say ModelOff is probably a really good place to start, because ModelOff is a really high level competition where they have a lot of sample questions, so you can practice. I mean, modelling is a practical thing. I know you know I've written 2 books on the subject, but you can't learn modelling just by reading. You need to actually practice and do it. And I think by practicing some of the ModelOff sample in a certain way, there's actually, it's just been announced, there is a brand new Financial Modelling World Cup that's starting up next month. So I'm really excited about that. And also with the FMI, the level 1 is fairly rehearsed and very structured. So like I showed you, you just follow, you follow a certain structure. So there's not a lot of creative thinking. But level 2, you're actually solving problems. So that is more about how you approach things. So yeah, I don't really have a sample in that way, a book exactly.
Thank you, Danielle. That was still a great shares that you made. I'll for sure check the ModelOff practices. Thank you very much.
Is this a new feature of Teams, Celia?
Yeah, it's available in some of the newer versions. So if you want to turn on your video cameras, you will start sitting with us. So.
Love it. I love it. Because we've never actually met in person, Celia.
Yeah, well, there we are. Look at that. Isn't it much nicer to see everyone together?
Very nice. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Hey, it's so nice to see some of the faces I know and see the new ones. Thank you for being with us. Yeah, not
they
everyone
look like chiclets.
Yeah, some people are kind of fading.
That's really clever.
Yeah, it's nice to see this, but one of my concerns, I used to be a teacher, and they talked about this feature as one of the ways of having students, and that, well, the little ones, I just can't imagine them jumping up and down and making all kinds of stuff just to look funny on this picture. So
yeah, of course.
But on the other hand, for example, now I'm not facing my camera, so I should be like this. And I guess it helps us not being so distracted with everyone's backgrounds. So that's another thing that it kind of can be useful. But this was just a distraction. I hope if you're
next to.
Sorry?
Oakley says, can you pick who you sit next to?
Can you pick who is? Oh no, I guess not yet. You just get what you get and you don't be upset. Hi. Who is saying? Who is waving? Is it Anne? Is it Anne? No. So yeah. So it just looks like someone I know. Any other questions or comments? Sorry to have to distract everyone and bring go off topic. Any other questions you would like for us? You're up there with Danielle.
Yeah, I'm the lucky one, sitting next to Daniel.
Yeah.
In fact, sitting in your row, all the superwomen.
How do you find, Danielle, financial modeling in the market as a required skill?
I think it's pretty. It's very popular. I think that it's certainly in finance, having financial modeling skills is definitely required. And the way to show that, it's very hard to demonstrate your financial modeling skills, even in an interview, because it's such a practical skill. And that's why I really like it on LinkedIn, how they have your skills and other people can endorse you. So other people who have seen evidence of your endorse people that way. Because I think financial modeling is certainly something for certain jobs, it's certainly a very much in demand requirement.
Yeah, and I think that having those certification exams available will help a little bit with that, right? So if you can't, add an interview showing your skills with financial modeling, then it's good to have some way of showing your skills through a certification.
Yeah.
Is there some kind of control around who does certifications, who is certifying?
Not really. I mean, there's no requirement for sitting it. If you can do it, there's no sort of training for it either. You have to just sit the exam and you either pass or fail. It's pretty tough.
No, but I meant the other way, on the other end. So the institution or organization providing the certification, certifying the examinees, do you know? I guess this could probably vary from country to country. Do you know if there's any country where there are laws already in place to make sure that the institution saying that you are skilled in this kind of skill is someone who has proper knowledge and is doing those certifications in a correct way to make sure that those certifications are actually are meaningful?
No, it's not. It's not required like that. It's not like the accounting profession. Yeah, I mean, in the past, it's always just been you say you're a financial modeler and they believe you, and you show the skills on your CV, and then that's it. There's never been a qualification until these FMI started, and it's global. So it's very much recognized around the world. So it's not something that you need specific. So if you think you're going to work somewhere else, then it's going to, it's very much a global qualification.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, Daniel, I have a question. Sorry, my chat wasn't working, so I couldn't put a question there. So, looks like the certification course, the first one, AFM, that has that requires very basic formula knowledge of
Yes.
Excel,
Yes.
and you should be or one should be aware of the financial tools or basic technical requirements. And since we didn't move to the other certifications tab, so would the skill requirement increase there? Would it involve VBA or something of that sort? Because the first one, when you were scrolling, it just threw some formula and ratios, which were really simple Excel formulas. So how the skill sets?
Yeah, there's sort of two sides of the skills that you need for financial modeling. There's the Excel skills, and then there's the finance knowledge. And the Excel for the exam, there's a lot more to life than the exam. I mean, I was modeling for many, many years before the exam was even created. So it's not the be all. You don't have to do the exam. It's just a way of showing your experience. But yes, the formulas are very, very simple. But the speed at which you need to build it and getting the links right and being able to pull everything together is historically only about 40% of people who sit the exam actually pass, mainly because of the speed. They just can't finish it in time.
How much percent?
Only about 40% pass.
Okay. Yeah, I guess financial, you could know a lot of Excel, but if you don't know the basics of finance to put things together, then
you need to have
it's no good. It's no good. And the other way around the same. So you need to have some kind of knowledge of Excel and understand. Okay, so in this situation, should I use a data validation? Is it good to put conditional formatting here? These type of things. And then, of course, the main thing before all that is to know which cells to bring in, which formulas.
Exactly.
And finance is mostly sums and subtractions, so the formulas shouldn't be too difficult, but you need to know which formulas to put in there and how to bring the information together. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So no VBA skills required.
In the exam, in the level 1 exam, yes, you do use a little bit of VBA for the macro, for the circular reference.
Could you? Is it something that you could show quickly, Danielle?
Yeah,
do you think?
Sure.
We are getting to the end of we have 10 more minutes, and then we should conclude our session.
So that's can you see the file there?
Yes.
This is a table of content, so you can find your way around. The other thing that you might find interesting is there's an error check here. I don't know if you can see that. There's just a very, very small little dash. You can see that's just picking up the error checks. I've got editing. Okay, that's better. So this I'll just enable the macro. So what that does is it calculates the interest, which then goes through the model and causes a circular reference. So that's the error check. So if I were to make a change, like if I were to change the scenario to worst case, for example, that will change the debt. So you can see that that's my error check down the bottom. So that's now out of balance. So when I run the macro, it will just scroll through and copy and paste. So it just takes the calculation from here and pastes it into the next row. So that's how the macro works. And to build that macro is really, really simple. Just hit record macro and then copy and paste. So if you have a look at there's just a recorded macro. There's really nothing overly.
It's just to avoid the
situation
of having a formula going round and around and coming back to the same original cell.
That's right.
Okay, very interesting. Any other questions or comments?
I think one thing I'd like to point out that you didn't mention, but I think it's a significant factor for us Canadians and Australians and New Zealanders. Anybody who uses the dollar sign and has their currency called a dollar, if you're in any kind of a scenario where your numbers relate to outside of your country, in any way, shape, or form, you should flag somewhere that all your currency is in A dollars or C dollars or US dollars, right? And that's, I mean, if you're talking about fundamentals, right? And plus, sometimes you get in the worst scenario, you have different fields that have different currencies. And of course, you should identify them. And you could do it by creating a custom format, but I find it's better just put it somewhere at the top of the document that this is in A dollars or C dollars or whatever. That's just one. That's just one advice.
Yeah, really common mistake in modeling is mixing up the currencies, getting it wrong, thinking dollars, and you know, Americans always assume that it's American dollars. Yeah.
Well, plus coincidentally, we use the same character to indicate our currency, but it's not the same.
Of course.
Like we should call it the Canadian peso or something like that.
Exactly. Easier.
Do you have to deal a lot with, well, I guess Excel does most of the work with that usually, with the thousand separator and the decimal separator. When we are working with Europe information, we have, so they use the comma to separate the decimal from the whole part of the number, and they use the dot to separate the thousands. And if you create a file in here and then we send it there, most of the work is just taken care of by Excel. But sometimes when we get data in text files, it can be can be confusing if people are not aware. Have you ever had to deal with something like that, or not really, Danielle?
No, I've not had too much trouble with that. Yeah, it usually just sorts itself out. I mean, well, one of the things that's just amazing about Excel, I used to travel all over the world and teach financial modeling, and you open up the Excel and, you know, maybe the language in Excel is completely different and the formatting is different, but the principles of best practice in financial modeling remain the same all over the world. And that's one of the things that's so fantastic about it.
Well, there's one thing about that, Celia, if I may interject here. When I choose in Excel, there are default formats that are related to the setting in your Windows machine at the Windows level as to what your local setting is, your internationalization, right? Yeah. And that can be a problem. and if you go into the format cells dialog box, I discovered this the hard way in one international thing. The French went crazy when we sent them a US application. The date, when you go into the date functions, for example, formats, there's an asterisk behind the first two. I'm not showing it to you, but you can imagine in the dialog box, if you choose date, for example, the first two items have an asterisk beside them. That means if you format your dates in your model that way, when you open that file in another Windows setting for another international set of settings, it will automatically adopt the settings that is set at the Windows level. If you choose anything that's not got an asterisk beside it, it's hard-coded to that format. You got that?
Great, I didn't realize that. It's good.
Yeah, it's kind of subtle. And the thing that bothers me is there should be one for default currency as well. But I don't see an asterisk for that. But I think if you choose currency, it may automatically change.
No, but you wouldn't want it to change because then the numbers wouldn't change.
No, it wouldn't change the numbers. It would change the formatting. Like here in Canada, we have 9 provinces that are English and 1 that is French. If I send a file to Quebec, my decimal places are commas and my comma separators are decimals. All right, and that is legitimate. It doesn't change any of the math or any of the calculations. It's just a format, right? So, but remember, if you open a file and suddenly it looks different in the formatting and the dates specifically, it's because your Windows setting is different than US International, which is what most people use, right? Although you get into trouble in dates because everybody has a different theory on dates, which is, and the worst one is the US, month, day, year. Who thought of that? Well, that makes no sense, but there, you can't fight City Hall, right? So anyway, I just thought to point that out. You should dig into that, everybody. Sorry. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we could stay here forever talking about date issues. Another thing is if you use text formulas to get, for example, the year out of a cell where the date shows in text, for example, it works well here. But if you send it to Portugal, for example, where the word year starts with an A and you put text Y, then there is nothing.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that's a whole other issue with the text formulas.
Yeah, good to know.
So secret is only do business in one country.
Yeah.
I guess, yes. Okay,
right.
very nice session, a lot of comments and a nice conversation. We have had a lot of people joining us today. We had around 52 people at some point. Now we have 32 people. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Make sure to follow Danielle on LinkedIn. She's always putting out interesting content. And if you can join her meetup sessions, always a lot of interesting content as well. For me, it's very difficult because they run around 3 a.m. for me. So it's kind of hard.
The timing isn't always good. We try to change the time.
Yeah, when I presented, it was 5 or 6 a.m., so not too bad. And pay attention to your email inbox. We will be sending the video recording and along with any files that Danielle might be sharing with us. If you don't receive it, it could be related to your settings on Meetup. Sometimes people opt out so that they are not bothered with emails all the time. So just make sure you have your settings in a proper way to be able to receive communications from us. And that's it. We'll be coming back with another session on September the 3rd about statistics. It will be a very interesting one. Make sure to register if you're interested in that topic. And make sure you enjoy summer if you are in the Northern Hemisphere. Hemisphere is not the same thing for Danielle. I know it's winter for them there.
But the good news is that spring is coming.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so
Bye.
much,
Everybody-
Danielle. It was great.
Thank you so much for
everybody
sharing good content.
Stay safe, everybody.
Yes, that too. Wear your mask.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.